Corruption, bribery. These aren't just buzzwords. They're the dark undercurrents that influence business deals, elections, and international trade across the globe. In a world where corporations wield immense power, bribery has become an unspoken rule in some corners of international business. But how deep does it go? And what are the consequences for the world's economies and citizens? Today, we're diving into the shadowy world of international bribery, examining how corruption seeps into the global corporate landscape and why it continues to thrive despite global efforts to curb it. International bribery is a multi-billion-dollar industry. According to the United Nations, an estimated $1 trillion is paid in bribes annually, with an additional $2.6 trillion stolen through corruption, a staggering 5% of the global GDP. Bribery scandals are not confined to one region. They stretch across continents, impacting both developed and developing countries. From government officials being paid off for favorable contracts, to multinational corporations greasing palms to secure business deals, bribery plays a key role in the flow of international business. Major corporations like Siemens, Petrobras, and even Goldman Sachs have been involved in massive bribery cases that shook industries and entire governments. Despite international laws like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, in the US and the UK Bribery Act, the problem persists. Why? Because in the shadowy world of global business, bribes often serve as a shortcut to bypass regulations, secure contracts, and open doors that would otherwise remain shut. Bribery can take many forms. In some cases, it's a suitcase filled with cash passed under the table. In others, it's more subtle: luxury gifts, extravagant trips, or hidden payments routed through offshore accounts. But no matter the method, the goal is the same: to influence decisions and gain an unfair advantage. Typically, international bribery involves three key players: the bribe payer, often a corporation; the bribe taker, usually a government official or a corporate decision-maker; and intermediaries who facilitate the transaction while keeping both parties at arm's length from direct involvement. These intermediaries might be consultants, local agents, or shell companies designed to hide the flow of illicit money. For corporations, paying bribes can mean the difference between securing a lucrative contract or losing out to a competitor. In developing nations, where regulatory oversight is often weaker, multinational companies are willing to pay millions in bribes to win infrastructure projects, energy contracts, or mining rights. And for government officials in corrupt regimes, these bribes provide a way to enrich themselves at the expense of their citizens. While some might see bribery as just another part of doing business, the true cost is much higher. Corruption and bribery stifle economic growth, reduce public trust, and divert resources away from critical infrastructure projects. In many cases, bribery results in poorly executed projects, inflated budgets, and subpar work. Roads and bridges built with corrupt contracts often crumble faster. Hospitals receive fewer resources, and the citizens suffer. The World Bank estimates that corruption adds up to 10% to the total cost of doing business globally, acting as a hidden tax on companies and consumers. In developing countries, bribery perpetuates poverty by diverting resources meant for public services into the hands of corrupt officials. A cycle of poverty that is difficult to break. One stark example of the economic cost of bribery is the Petrobras scandal in Brazil, where the national oil company was at the center of a massive bribery ring. Billions of dollars were siphoned off through inflated contracts and kickbacks, which crippled the company and led to a deep economic recession in Brazil. Some of the largest bribery cases in recent history have revealed just how pervasive corruption is at the highest levels of international business. The Siemens scandal, for example, is a textbook case of corporate corruption. For years, Siemens used bribery as a standard business practice, paying hundreds of millions of dollars to secure contracts in countries across the world. In 2008, Siemens was fined $1.6 billion by US and European regulators for its involvement in widespread bribery. The investigation revealed that the company had created a vast network of slush funds to pay off officials in countries like Argentina, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. The scandal tarnished Siemens' reputation and highlighted the role of bribery in global corporate strategy. Another infamous case is the 1MDB scandal in Malaysia, where billions of dollars were embezzled from a government investment fund. High-ranking officials, including former Prime Minister Najib Razak, were implicated in the scandal, which involved lavish spending on luxury real estate, art, and even financing Hollywood films. The 1MDB scandal not only rocked Malaysia, but also revealed the global scale of corruption, as banks and financial institutions from New York to Switzerland were caught up in the laundering of illicit funds. Underscore a key reason international bribery is so difficult to combat is the complex web of offshore accounts and shell companies that are often used to hide illicit payments. These entities registered in tax havens like the Cayman Islands, Panama, and the British Virgin Islands. These offshore accounts and shell companies serve as critical tools in the world of international bribery. They allow corporations and individuals to funnel money in ways that are difficult for regulators and law enforcement to track. By routing bribes through layers of anonymous entities, those involved can obscure the money trail, making it nearly impossible to link payments back to their original sources. The infamous Panama Papers leak in 2016 provided a rare glimpse into how the global elite use offshore structures to hide wealth and avoid taxes. Among the revelations were numerous instances of companies and individuals using these shell companies to facilitate bribes and other forms of corruption. The Panama Papers implicated business leaders, politicians, and even celebrities, showcasing the breadth of the problem. Offshore financial centers, known for their lack of transparency, have long been criticized for facilitating corruption. In 2024, despite global efforts to crack down on these havens, many continue to operate in the shadows. The lack of international coordination and inconsistent regulations across jurisdictions allows corrupt actors to exploit legal loopholes, making it harder to hold them accountable. Despite the shadowy nature of international bribery, there are laws in place designed to combat this corruption. The U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, enacted in 1977, was one of the first laws aimed at addressing the issue of bribery by making it illegal for American companies to pay foreign officials to secure business deals. The FCPA has been used to prosecute companies like Siemens, Halliburton, and Walmart for engaging in bribery overseas. The UK Bribery Act, introduced in 2010, took things even further by not only prohibiting companies from paying bribes, but also from failing to prevent bribery within their organizations. This means companies can be held accountable for corruption, even if they were unaware that bribes were being paid by intermediaries or subsidiaries. In recent years, international cooperation has increased in the fight against bribery. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, has led efforts to create global anti-bribery standards, and countries like Germany, Brazil, and South Korea have strengthened their own anti-corruption laws. However, enforcement remains inconsistent, and the penalties imposed on companies are often seen as the cost of doing business. Even when companies are caught and fined, the individuals responsible for orchestrating bribes often escape serious punishment. Corporate executives rarely face prison time, and companies typically settle cases without admitting guilt. This lack of accountability perpetuates a culture where bribery is seen as a necessary evil in international business. While corporate bribery is often discussed in terms of financial penalties and legal consequences, the human cost is far more profound. Bribery in international business disproportionately affects people in developing countries, where corruption diverts resources away from public services, weakens institutions, and erodes trust in government. Take healthcare, for example. In countries where bribery is rampant, funds meant for hospitals, medicine, and essential services often end up in the pockets of corrupt officials. The result is a lack of access to adequate healthcare for the general population, contributing to higher mortality rates and preventable diseases. In infrastructure, corrupt deals lead to poorly built roads, bridges, and buildings that collapse or deteriorate quickly, putting lives at risk. The environmental consequences of corporate bribery are also significant. In industries like mining and oil extraction, companies often pay bribes to bypass environmental regulations, leading to unchecked deforestation, pollution, and habitat destruction. Communities living near these projects suffer the consequences, facing contaminated water, health problems, and displacement. One of the starkest examples of the human toll of corruption is seen in the mining industry. In countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, bribery and corruption have allowed foreign companies to exploit the country's vast mineral wealth at the expense of local communities. Resources like cobalt and gold, which are essential to the global tech industry, are extracted under dangerous and exploitative conditions, with little benefit going to the local population. Despite global efforts to combat bribery, it remains an entrenched problem in international business. In 2024, technology is playing a dual role in both enabling and combating bribery. On one hand, advancements in digital payments and cryptocurrency have made it easier to move money across borders anonymously, creating new challenges for regulators. On the other hand, data analytics, blockchain, and artificial intelligence offer new tools for detecting and preventing bribery. Blockchain technology, in particular, has the potential to increase transparency in international transactions by providing a secure, tamper-proof ledger that can track the flow of money. Some companies and governments are exploring ways to use blockchain to ensure that contracts are fulfilled without the need for intermediaries, reducing the opportunities for bribery. However, these technologies are still in their infancy, and widespread adoption is likely years away. In the meantime, the pressure is mounting on multinational corporations to clean up their practices. Investors, consumers, and advocacy groups are calling for greater transparency and ethical behavior in business. Corporate social responsibility (CSR) programs are becoming more common, with companies pledging to combat corruption and uphold high ethical standards. But the question remains: will these initiatives lead to real change, or are they just public relations exercises designed to deflect criticism? The shadowy world of international bribery is vast and complex, with deep roots in global business. While progress has been made in combating corruption, the fight is far from over. Bribery continues to thrive in the gray areas of international trade, enabled by weak regulations, offshore financial networks, and a lack of accountability. As long as there are profits to be made, companies will face pressure to cut corners, pay off officials, and secure deals by any means necessary. The challenge for the future is not just in enforcing the laws that already exist, but in changing the culture of corruption that has become ingrained in many industries. Thanks for watching Biz Breakdowns. If you found this deep dive into the world of international bribery insightful, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories on how business shapes the world we live in. Let us know in the comments, what do you think needs to happen to truly tackle corporate corruption?